As a child, my father would tell me a variety of stories that I didn't realize were inappropriate for a little one. They were a series of scary stories about the Barrel Buddy. It was always pitched as a true story, but it never felt real to me. I was never scared of the stories, just fascinated. I live in a quiet fishing town, and that's our setting. On a little pier used by small hobbyist line fishers, an odd vagrant walked by every morning when the fog was heavy and salty, as if he himself controlled it. On his head he wore a dark brown canvas sack, black eyes peering out from the holes, so black it was hard to see where he was looking. The area around his eyes was gray like a seal's, unnaturally gray, sickly and wet. Some old-timers said it was a boating accident that done scarred him up. Others insisted a woman threw acid on him for looking at her for too long. Still others said it was a genetic experiment splicing his genes. All three theories could explain his hands. Barrel Buddy, as they called him, had weak hands. Normal Caucasian hands, but weak, uncoordinated hands nonetheless. He could never move his fingers individually, they acted more like flippers. He showed up before the crack of dawn, before anyone had caught anything, dragging a big plastic blue barrel with him. He never talked, and I'm not sure if he could. He didn't have a fishing pole either, just his barrel. For the most part, he was ignored by those that frequented the pier. Most of them were retirees or poor jobless folks that fished to eat, all kind salt-of-the-earth people that just looked out for each other, including Barrel Buddy. They mostly ignored him because they knew his deal. He would watch, and once they had caught 2 fish, he'd approach them, the thumping of his barrel dragged behind him along the ground, following with him. He'd stick out both hands, and always the regulars would hand him their first 2 catches of the day. Thunk, thunk. He'd throw the fish into the barrel and walk off. As one could imagine, both he and the barrel reeked of fish. Once he had a dozen or so fish, he'd wander off for a while and return closer to noon. You could tell he was about to return by the smell of fresh fried fish, a far cry from the stinky smell he would don in the morning. He returned the fish to everyone that gave him 2. He handed them out without a peep, and everyone was always very thankful. Often, fishermen would hand as many fish as they could before he'd vanish into some unknown place to fry them, because he'd return and give out all the fish, battered and deep-fried. The hungry fishermen relied on this man for cooked meals most days. No one questioned Barrel Buddy, or even looked at him strange, except for outsiders. My grandfather was one such outsider. He took my father fishing one day, playing hooky from school, and he was real young when this happened. Both were disturbed at just the sight of Barrel Buddy, but the regulars wisely told them to just ignore him. That's when my dad caught his first ever fish. He was over the moon until he caught another, and the Barrel Buddy demanded his fish tax. Both my father and grandfather refused at first, until an old retired seaman explained that it was a bad idea to deny him. My grandfather finally relented when this seaman whispered something into his ear. My dad never figured out what it was. My dad threw a tantrum on the way home. That night, my dad woke up hearing a bang on his window, not a loud one, but a bang nonetheless. He found that his window was open, and on his homework desk was a fried fish leaching grease into his makeup homework his mom had collected from school earlier. He said he ate it then and there, and that it was really tasty. As an adult, my dad would sometime visit the pier Barrel Buddy went to every morning. He saw more than one person refuse to hand over a fish, and I guess they disappeared in the night. How true any of that was, I didn't know. I guess it's really not much darker than a Brothers Grimm tale now that I'm saying it aloud, but I know now that none of this was a fairy tale. Urban explorers just found 4 blue barrels in the sewer system with partially eaten corpses inside, along with a long rusted frying pan. Come to think of it, no one ever did see Barrel Buddy eat his own fried fish.